Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. Well, what was once a Category 4 storm of a lifetime has weakened to Category 1 before making landfall earlier today.
Jennifer Wishon reports on the path of Hurricane Florence.
Hurricane Florence collided with the coast around 6 a.m., slamming into Wilmington, North Carolina, packing wind gusts of 105 miles per hour and demonstrating she's no lady. In New Bern, North Carolina, 150 people had to be rescued from rising floodwaters.
Surviving this storm will be a test of endurance, teamwork, common sense, and patience.
In South Carolina, another state in the hurricane's crosshairs,
Proverbs 6:6 through 8 says,
emergency officials turned to the Bible and prayed to God.
Help us to use this event as a rallying point for unity. Help keep us safe, O Lord. Help us to honor and praise you even in the midst of the storm.
Florence is expected to dump some 20 inches of rain on Myrtle Beach, is churning storm surges up to 10 feet, and farther inland, rivers are already overflowing their banks. In mountainous regions, officials warn of mudslides. Power outages are widespread tonight. Some 40,000 power workers from 17 states are mobilizing to respond. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people across the Carolinas and Virginia are weathering the storm in shelters.
Once these winds start blowing at that tropical storm rate, it will be virtually impossible for the rescuers to get in to rescue you.
President Trump says he's confident the federal government is ready to respond. Many in the storm's path are holding on to the promise that they're not alone.
Help us to remember that the same God that created the heavens and the earth, that this same God that is with us and will see us through the storm. We ask all these things in your gracious name, Lord.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Well, James Joseph is a senior administrator with FEMA. He joins us now with more. James, thanks so much for being here.
Good morning.
What's one thing you want Americans who will be directly impacted by the storm to know?
Well, the first thing is everyone's focused on that the hurricane has dropped to a Category 1, and they think that that we're out of the waters, but we're not. There's a devastating amount of rain, high wind surges that we're going to be seeing, wind gusts that we're going to be seeing, and we've already started seeing in some areas as this hurricane made landfall 9 to 12 feet of storm surge. That's deadly, very dangerous storm surge. And for those that evacuated, we appreciate all of those that heeded the warnings of state and local officials to evacuate. But now we've got first responders that are putting their own lives at additional risk. They're already at risk on a daily basis, but at additional risk, trying to make some of these risky rescue operations. So for those that are being impacted now by the heavy winds and this rainfall, shelter in place and call 911 if and only if it's an absolute emergency.
James, this year is expected to be a busy, above-average year for storms. We saw it last year with a 1-2 punch after Harvey and then Maria. Do you think the government is prepared for what may be coming after Florence?
Yeah, I think we are. Even when we look at 2017, FEMA published an after-action report several months ago, citing what worked very well from our response, but also what some of the lessons are that we need to implement immediately. And we did so prior to this hurricane season. So we're focused right now on lifeline critical infrastructure as the federal government, looking at what are the things that people need from a recovery perspective, that the communities need from a recovery perspective. But this is a team effort. Every event starts at the local level and ends at that local level. So we're working with state and local partners to assist them in their response as we're in the midst of this storm right now, the heavy rains we're going to see for several days, and also in the recovery in the aftermath of this event.
Well, James, thank you for your time today, and also thank you for everything the agency is doing to help Americans.
Thank you. God bless.
Well, Eric Rosales has spent the week reporting from North Carolina, one of the states that has been preparing and is now really seeing the brunt of the storm. Eric, what are you seeing where you're at right now?
Well, I tell you, lots of wind and rain. We're experiencing wind gusts of up to 30 to 40 to even 50 miles an hour, and it's just keeping the car very, very tough to control on the road. Right now, we're on our way. We're on our way to Wilmington. We're currently in Lumberton, North Carolina, right now, and where we're seeing quite a bit of flooding taking place in Lumberton, North Carolina. But I tell you what, nothing like taking place along the North Carolina coastline, where the surge, they saw anywhere from 10 feet of water. We have reports that a number of homes are, all the water's all the way up to the second floor there, and evacuations are actually taking place in New Bern, North Carolina, just to the north of us. Some 200 people have been rescued, and emergency crews tell CBN News that another 150 have to be rescued, but they're going to have to wait it out just a little bit longer until the storm. But as you take a look at these trees, you can get a better picture of how fast these winds are going right now. But we're going to continue on our way to Wilmington, where the eye of the storm came on at about 7 o'clock this morning. So we're going to bring you those pictures a little bit later.
Eric, really appreciate the work that you and photojournalist Mario Gonzalez are doing out there. We know you're taking all the necessary precautions. I wonder, though, in your visits throughout the state, are other people taking the necessary precautions? Are they taking the storm seriously?
A number of people are taking the storm seriously. We're not seeing too many people on the roadways right now, just emergency crews and 18-wheelers bringing in supplies. But we did talk to a number of people just outside, and there's another wind gust right there. We did talk to a number of people outside, and they're outside their homes, and they said they're going to hunker down and they're going to stay inside, and they have all the necessary precautions, from generators to water to food.
All right, Eric Rosales for us in North Carolina. Thank you so much, Eric. Stay safe.
Local officials along the southeast coast have been prepping folks for the hurricane throughout the week.
For more on that, we turn to CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy. Hey, Ben.
Well, hey, John and Jenna, you just heard James talk about how crews are keeping a pretty close eye on the radar, having teams on the ground to pinpoint where help is needed most. Hurricane Florence made landfall at about 7:15 a.m. as a Category 1. But FEMA wants people to not just focus on the number, but the impact, as this storm plans to stick around. It's moving slowly at 6 miles an hour, and during that pace will drop lots of water, which will no doubt lead to major flooding.
This is only the beginning. Florence is a very slow mover. We'll continue to trek along the North Carolina and South Carolina coastline for the next 24 to 36 hours. It will not get to Columbia, South Carolina until Sunday midnight morning.
And CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales is seeing this firsthand on the ground. Crews are working overtime to get people to higher ground and to safety. President Trump tweeted out, "Incredible job being done by FEMA, first responders, law enforcement, and all. Thank you." President Trump received an emergency preparedness update at the White House here behind me earlier today. He's been in touch with FEMA and state leaders as the hurricane hits. A tornado watch will also remain in effect as the storm surges along the coast and through the weekend. John, Jenna, back to you.
All right, thank you, Ben Kennedy, for us at the White House. Well, even before Florence made landfall, the editorial board of the Washington Post created a firestorm of its own, criticizing and even blaming President Trump for the storm. The Washington Post said, in part, quote, "When it comes to extreme weather, Mr. Trump is complicit." It also criticized Trump for rolling back Obama-era environmental regulations.
Well, Curtis Houck is the managing editor of Newsbusters. He joins us now for more. Curtis, do you think it's irresponsible for the editorial board of the Washington Post to call the president complicit with regard to this extreme weather condition?
It's stunning. Well, first of all, the hurricane hasn't even hit land when this editorial was written. It was still at least, a day and a half out. So, and looking at the forecast and things change, hurricanes don't care what a president's approval rating is, and they don't care who stays and who doesn't. Storm surge doesn't think about whose house they hit before the surge and the water and the flooding come through. The 100-mile-an-hour winds don't really care who they're affecting. So to say that this president is already complicit in something that hasn't even hit land yet it's so irresponsible. And the fact that they mention Barack Obama's environmental legacy that he's going after, it just shows pettiness on the part of the news media here. And it's the Washington Post. Democracy dies in darkness, as their slogan goes. I don't even have words to describe how ridiculous this is. And really, it's gotten a lot of traction on Newsbusters because people just simply cannot believe what they're reading, that the Washington Post would go that far.
I think you raise a valid point. The fact that, a lot of the president's opponents would criticize his decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord agreement, but that was just recently. So to attribute blame for climate change and this particular hurricane might seem a little bit of an overreach.
Right. Okay. So the Paris Climate Accord is just a piece of paper at this point. It is a bunch of countries that said, we will do X, we will do blank. We promise to, in so many years, depending on, our part of the accord, we will do this much by this time, and we will fix carbon emissions by this time. And so I did a little research looking at hurricanes specifically that hit the Carolinas. And going back through 1984, we had a hurricane cause $65.5 million of damage at that time. Hurricane Hugo, Category 4 storm from 1989, $9.7 billion of damage. Hurricane Emily, 1993, $35 billion of damage. And moving forward to the present, Hurricane Isabel, 2003, $5.5 billion of damage. So it's something that happens. That is part of the weather. There's a reason that hurricanes trigger so much fascination, among people in their minds and why people tune into the Weather Channel. But to say that the president is responsible for what's going on here because he withdrew from a Paris Climate Accord and he's loosening restrictions on natural gas in this country, in other parts of the country, not having to do with the Carolinas, it's just this level of stupidity.
The editorial board said the president and the GOP have cemented their legacy when it comes to climate change. What are your thoughts on that?
When you're going this far to kind of connect the president to a hurricane and storm surge, that presidents almost like want these hurricanes to prosper or something like that. That's what they're looking at the president's words describing this hurricane as it's coming close to land. And they're saying, oh, he seems almost excited about it, as Jen Psaki, formerly with the Obama administration, said on CNN a few days ago. So it's this pattern and it's this kind of building kind of avalanche of rhetoric coming out of the news media that this president is responsible, that he's almost excited about this, a hurricane that is likely to, God forbid, but most hurricanes do leave a death toll in their wake of some sort. To automatically assign blame here just shows how kind of blind. It's not really about informing the public, and it's not about keeping people safe. It's about forwarding an agenda that can lessen this president's credibility and, eventually cause his party to lose seats in Congress or to remove him from office. So again, this rhetoric is just so dangerous. It's so irresponsible. And to use the word complicit, everybody knows what that word means. That means that you're responsible for something and that you played a part in it. And people know that. And it's just, again, I just have run out of words to describe how absurd this is.
Well, Curtis Houck of Newsbusters, thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Anytime.
How the church played a key role in the recovery effort after Hurricane Harvey devastated part of Texas last year. Churches and faith-based organizations often lead the way in recovery efforts after natural disasters.
Last year, I had the chance to travel down to one of the hardest hit areas by Hurricane Harvey to see firsthand.
It's all fun and games at the Johnston home today, just outside of Houston, a far cry from a year ago when Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas Gulf Coast. Days of rain sent a nearby river surging to biblical levels.
John, they actually said this was going to be an 800-year flood high from the Brazos River.
Water streamed onto their property.
To see our backyard turn into a lake, see the kids swing set, the water come up on that, again, it was just terrifying.
Initially, county officials told residents to shelter in place.
Then we're told, don't hide in the attic, go on the roof. And that's when I freaked out because how do you go on the roof with 5 kids? How do you go on the roof with triplet boys?
Hours later came the mandatory evacuation order. Jeremiah and Audrey packed up their 5 kids and took off. They drove for 4 nightmarish hours trying to escape before being forced into harm's way. Driving into oncoming traffic became their only option.
Because our car would have gotten stuck that way, so we had to go straight.
So we have our hazard lights flashing on our vehicle. I'm flashing, I'm doing my horn, and I'm praying.
We didn't know going forward if there was another car, and thankfully there wasn't.
When we got to the hotel that night, I broke down because finally I realized we were safe.
For a whole week, they relied on the kindness of other Christians for housing, with offers from strangers and friends alike. When the order was finally lifted, the Johnstons returned to find their home mostly intact.
You have to replace walls? Yeah, everything is brand new.
Audrey saw their good fortune and something else.
Because the Lord allowed our home to be spared, that it's our duty and honor to go help those who weren't as fortunate.
The Johnstons know they're fortunate to have survived with minimal damage to their home and, more importantly, for everyone to stay safe. And as first-time hurricane survivors, they're even more appreciative of the prayer and support of the church.
It's been amazing to see the church at work and to step up and be the hands and feet of Jesus.
In the wake of Hurricanes Harvey and Irma, churches have proven to be invaluable partners, outpacing the work of the government. Jeremiah, a Bible college professor, believes these storms serve as a reminder of the significance of the church.
There are voices that say Christianity's passé. God is irrelevant. The church is so irrelevant. We don't need the church anymore. Guess what? No one was saying that after Hurricane Harvey.
You know, Jenna, he makes a great point. When people are in need, you're not questioning what church do you belong to or where do you come from or what are your political beliefs. You just want help.
Yeah, it brings everybody together.
That's absolutely right.
All right, we'll be right back.
Well, 7 years ago, Danielle Stammer thought her life was about to end when an EF5 tornado came slamming through the walls around her and her baby.
Yeah, she'd become separated from her husband and their 3-year-old son, as she never expected to see them again. Here is her family's story.
On May 22, 2011, Andrew and Danielle Stammer were driving to a friend's home with their 2 children when they heard tornado sirens.
Heard that there was a tornado possibility, you know, just a warning coming through the north side, the top of Joplin, where we were heading.
The couple soon heard that a second storm cell was heading for the middle of Joplin. They decided to take shelter at the hospital where Andrew was employed. Unaware of how imminent the danger, they first stopped by their home for personal belongings.
I was wanting to make sure that we had like our essential things, like their passports and birth certificates.
There was really no fear at all. Every other storm that came would circle Joplin. It would either run to the north or to the south. We had no idea that what was happening right then.
As they began their drive to St. John's Hospital, they realized how quickly the storm was approaching.
I didn't see anybody outside, and it was just like there was a quiet, but then we could see like a wall of black in front of us.
There was no wind. Everything was still, everything was quiet, but everything was charged. The field was charged. And then we saw this, out of the black sky, this shoot of light going straight up. And they call them power surges, I think. That's one of the indicators that a tornado is on the ground. And I prayed out loud, Lord, please protect our family. I thought we are in over our heads here.
The family made it to the entryway of St. John's Hospital with mere minutes to spare. Danielle grabbed 1-year-old Ethan and ran inside.
I walked into the glass entryway, turned around, and the wind was so strong that Andrew was having a hard time getting into the building where we were. He was hunched over with Emily, our at that time 3-year-old, against his chest, bared down, step at a time, just to try to get into where we were.
When Andrew made it inside, they realized the hospital was on lockdown, and they were unable to get past the entryway.
Basically, I was thinking, I just need to get my family to safety, and this is not safe. I just had Emily in my left hand, and I just started slamming myself against it. And After about 6 or 7 times, the door broke off the bottom track.
The couple slipped underneath the cracked door just seconds before an F5 tornado, one of the deadliest in U.S. history, slammed directly into the hospital.
As soon as I slipped under that door, no sooner had I gotten right past it, all the lights went out, and I was immediately thrown down on the floor with my son underneath me. This whole hospital is being torn to shreds around me.
The family was separated in an instant.
I mean, as soon as I walked in, the lights went out. I had no idea what happened to them.
I was picked up off my feet, went about 10 or 15 feet across the floor, and got slammed into that door. And all the while I was still holding Emily. And then next thing I knew, I was on the bottom stair of the outside staircase with my daughter underneath me. I was holding her right here, and I was holding the railing.
In the midst of the raging storm, the couple cried out to God.
I was just crying out, God save us. God save us, Lord, please help.
And with my baby nestled under me, I was just singing worship songs, whatever came to mind, and I felt so peaceful, and I felt like I could almost touch peace, and that if I had lifted my eyes, I would have seen glory. And I thought, okay, this is how my story ends. I never knew what it was going to be. As I was singing, I thought, you know what? I think they'll find him and he'll be okay.
St. John's Hospital was severely mangled by the storm. Upper stories completely destroyed. Cars in the hospital parking lot were tossed and disfigured beyond recognition.
When I could not find my wife and son, I was very nervous, and I just wanted to be back with her. And so I just went back into the hospital. The door was already open, and I don't know if I called out for her or if she called out for me.
But Andrew and Danielle Stammer's prayers were answered. They successfully held their children in their arms, and the family walked away with only minor cuts and bruises.
We finally got back together, and it was, I think I remember hugging her, and it was very short-lived, our reunion.
After their reunion, the couple had to quickly face the reality of the storm and its widespread destruction.
It just looked like a totally different landscape. There's no houses. There's trees that are not there anymore, and far as the eye could see.
They say that while prayer offered them supernatural protection during the storm, it also brought comfort in the aftermath.
And it was interesting because both of us had the same reactions to it all, replaying what could have happened, and both of us fought against it and proclaimed truth a winner. Neither of us had nightmares about the tornado after that at all.
Though the family lost their home, their cars, and all of their belongings that day, they say they are still thankful for the blessings they have and the help they received from others.
His provision through his people was so beautiful. People came to our house to help us, people who we didn't know were doing our laundry. People were just everywhere, lining the streets, doing what they could to help. And I thought, okay, I'm taking notes, because when someone else is suffering, I want to do these kind of things.
Danielle wrote about the miraculous survival in her book, Singing Over Me. They hope the book will show others how prayer brought them protection, comfort, and the strength to carry on despite the tornado.
In the midst of him saving us, he has given us this gift of this story that we have, this story of triumph through tragedy and survival in the midst of horrendous circumstances. The hope that I have for the future, the hope that I have for now, is so much greater.
I definitely saw that he is near me, whether I live or whether I don't live. I know that, that God heard us. I definitely believe that prayer changes the world.
An incredible story of hope, just like they said. Well, we want to mention that for continued coverage of this hurricane, you can go to cbnnews.com.
That's going to do it for today's Faith Nation.